In one of my previous videos, I got a super long comment that disagreed with a particular segment in my latest tier list video. Tier list, y'all know what I'm saying. The comment then goes on to say, your take here at 2044 feels unnecessarily antagonistic and just misses the mark. I think at the very least, you should be more empathetic and avoid dunking on players. It makes it hard to hear you out when those are likely the people you needed to reach the most. I hate to tell it to you, but there is some player accountability to be had. This is your fault. If you only pulled Anomaly characters, that is 162% your fault. I don't give a about anything else beyond that point. If you've been playing the game for a year and you've only pulled Anomaly characters, that is 100% your fault. Period. Let's get that out of the way. However, right, second thing, moving into that, now you get into what options do you have? What can you do? How is this good or bad for the game? And after reading that, I appreciate the comment to a degree. Yes, it's worded in a way that still rejects player accountability, but it's thoughtful and represents how a lot of Anomaly mains are currently feeling. It points out a key thing that who I'm trying to reach may not be listening to me due to how I speak, aka my tone. For those of you that have been following me for quite a bit, I'm working on how I speak to people every single day, but I am a very blunt person. A lot of what I say just isn't sugarcoated. At the end of the day, I'm offering advice or suggestions to help players put themselves in better positions. My goal isn't to dunk on players, it's to talk about how the game's design affects player expectations and what those options are to circumvent that. Yes, Anomaly was a dominant and supported archetype for at least half of Zenless's lifespan. The Defiler, though, is a rude awakening. It feels like the game suddenly says, that team you invested in? Yeah, no, get that frustration is completely valid. So let's talk about where our perspective split, the core player versus game design argument, a clarification I should make, and how me being the antagonist here is the best real world scenario for most of the player base. Before we begin, here's a really fun fact about character development and world building. In the best written stories, the antagonist is the hero, or an unrestricted version of the hero, if you will. And to be exact, what I mean by that is the protagonist, aka the hero, is usually aiming for a particular goal, but constantly held back by morals, responsibilities, or ideals imprinted on him throughout their journey. The antagonist, on the other hand, often has those same goals, but without being held back by societal norms. A perfect antagonist is effective because they are powerful in some way, shape, or form, have clear motivations, and challenge the protagonist on a deep level, even if they aren't necessarily evil. Recent examples of this in anime would be like Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan or Shigaraki from My Hero. Why did I just give you a backstory on character writing? Well, I mean, I'm not your enemy. I don't know. Is that not obvious? Instead of hearing what I say as some villainous thing, it's better to view me as someone who doesn't accept others forcing an outcome on them than teaching you guys how to do the same. Obviously, I understand within context of a gacha game, certain things are just out of your control. Losing a 50-50, having access to specific characters or gear, and direct attacks from the developers themselves. So here's the part where our perspectives split. On one side, we have the elusive Anomaly main's point of view. This viewpoint usually details something like Anomaly players built what the game encouraged. The game told us to do this, so the devs are clearly the ones that we need to blame. On the other side, we have players like myself who will say something along the lines of, even when a meta is strong, long-term players should expect some type of shift or change in the game itself, right? The meta. I had to say meta twice. Or you'll hear something along the lines of like, Anomaly being king forever would be unhealthy game design. Sometimes both of these points can be true at the same time. This leads us into the most direct problem players are experiencing, even after having it explained from multiple perspectives. Every gacha or live service game has a certain meta volatility to it, and funny, guys, it took me like forever to figure out how to say that word and then get it out into the microphone. What that means is at any point in time, X or Y thing will be the strongest strategy in the meta for an indefinite period of time. Every single game does this. Pokemon, Overwatch, Marvel Rivals, League of Legends, Street Fighter 6, fucking Yu-Gi-Oh! There is never a thing called escaping the meta. You either play with it, against it, or you counter it. The only gacha game that has allowed players the freedom to slap whatever they wanted together and get away with it has always been Genshin Impact. This is, mind you, this is Genshin Impact circa before Skirt came out. So I'm pretty sure that's 2025, right? Circa 2025. Before that, no other game that I'm aware of has promoted the ability to casually reject the meta and succeed. This is why I constantly say that mentality spawned primarily from the Genshin Impact player base. Then after hearing all that, you might start to ask the question, why am I forced to play the meta? And the reality is you aren't. The whole point here is that diversification is a form of player insurance. It's not about doing it to satisfy the game or me as a creator. It's about you being comfortable enough with your account to do everything you want to do. Emphasis on you. If you invest your whole account into a single playstyle, i.e. Anomaly, then any balance change becomes a personal earthquake. It doesn't matter if it's attack-centric or rupture-focused. If you personally don't build into it for whatever reason you're about to type in the comments, that is not the game's fault. You made that decision and it will either work in your favor or not. You think people that pulled Bernice are somehow blaming the game for them making Vivian? They have to continue improving and making more new things. That is gacha games. At the same time, this also addresses one of the statements in that comment, and I quote, "Not everyone that plays Zenless watches content creators. The game has millions of players. You content creators have tens of thousands of subs, and a lot of those are the same people. I've personally never seen any content creator give warnings and say, hey guys, in the next few patches, Anomaly as an archetype is going to get cucked to the point that it will be impossible for you to clear the next few bosses. Here's what you need to do if you haven't diversified yet." I never saw or heard anything like that. In this situation, who would that comment specifically be addressing? The content creator for not making hyper-specific content to a player that doesn't ask these questions? The player for not looking harder for the information that helps them the best? Or YouTube because of the typical algorithm excuse, which, to be completely accurate, YouTube shows viewers what they engage with the most. If you, as a player or viewer, don't engage with creators that actively provide the type of content you're looking for, that's not the content creator or YouTube's fault. I say that as someone who has multiple videos on their channel forewarning you about this very exact thing. I've talked about Anomaly being phased out. I've talked about Aftershock and Attack being phased out and Rupture being phased in a multitude of times in a number of videos. Just like I can't blame a viewer for not watching every single one of my videos on the dot, the viewer can't blame a content creator for something that they're not looking for or don't engage with. But I'm not going to take up too much of your time on that matter because I have an entire segment going over how YouTube works over on my Twitch. With all of that being said, there is a clarification I'd like to make here. I was never saying you deserve to lose because you built Anomaly. What I am saying is when we choose to hyper specialize, we also choose the risk that comes with it. That's not blaming, that's acknowledging how these games are built. If you pulled Ishwin thinking she's an Anomaly agent, then decided you weren't going to use her despite owning one of her strongest teams, you are purposely shooting yourself in the foot, then calling the cops and blaming it on your neighbor. Here is where we should blame the game though, and at no point should Zenless ever do these. Zenless should not completely invalidate Anomaly comps in new content. I currently don't believe they've done this yet, and I don't see any reason for them to do it in the future. As plenty of us in my community have been explaining, the complaints lately about anti-Anomaly aren't really about anomalies at all. It's more like anti-Miyabi because Anomaly is still able to defeat what it needs to perfectly fine. The game has been adjusting to counter Mono Ice or Yuzu Ice, aka anti-Miyabi. Zenless should not create DPS checks that are impossible without mindscapes. Again, I don't believe they've done this yet. What they have done, which is something I've addressed in previous videos, is adjust the difficulty bar for players that were already considered top 3% or higher in the leaderboards. The challenge for players to get 20k is the goal, and that's always been the same. Getting higher than that is something the players earn, and prior to a couple of patches ago, most of us were blindly getting 50k points without so much as a thought. Now we actually have to think about which buttons we press, and some players are getting their panties in a bunch. Is that proper to say right now? I feel like that's proper to say. Lastly, Zenless should not inflate HP so hard that certain comps hit a wall against favorable or neutral matchups. I've explained matchups enough. I feel like I shouldn't have to do that at this point. The gist of it all is that those are legit criticisms, and I'm right there with you. Despite me saying all of that, here's what I still stand by. A meta shift towards attack or rupture comps is necessary long term. Every archetype should rotate in relevance. Players adapting isn't a betrayal to the community, it's part of the game loop. All three of these are pivotal components to helping Zenless continue creating a healthy rotation of the in-game meta. For context, we haven't had an actual DA cycle that only favors Anomaly, attack, or rupture. It's always been mixed, where the most we'll get is a 2 out of 3 shill. Thankfully, there is a constructive middle ground all of us can come to. The meta shift itself isn't the actual issue. The speed at which it happened compared to the banner frequency we get and the lack of communication were the issue. While we knew meta shifts were constantly happening, the game didn't properly signal how major the shift would be, and content creators have a harder time warning players before the changes get here. A lot of you already look at leaks, but you don't know how to accurately read the information you get from said leak. Multiple content creators dance around leaks but don't actually have the in-game experience to properly teach you ahead of time. CE server players have all of that information, but they're not given enough time to properly test everything before releasing their videos. So where do we go from here? I believe this debate is healthy. It helps define the type of game Zenless wants to become. Shifting the meta, making adjustments to your board, and adapting to new changes and mechanics is what helps keep gaming communities active. If you're an Anomaly main, you're not wrong for deciding to invest into your favorite playstyle, and you're not being punished for doing that. The game isn't a conscious being that acts out of vengeance or some bullshit. Think of this situation more like Smash Bros. Not a single person in the entire world only plays one character. If you're getting ready to type that in the comments, I'm immediately gonna call you a liar. Even the best players in the world, the pros, have a main character they play, then backup or sub characters to help them fight against their main's unfavorable matchups. If you start thinking about and building out your account more like that, I promise nothing in this game will stop you from clearing the in-game content or dealing with the meta, but that's the same thing. Just subscribe so I can get more views.